Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2021 and a rebranding and rejig of the Marketing Essentials series. We're now coming to you live streaming via StreamYard on LinkedIn Live, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We're here bringing you the same amazing curated content and thought leadership on what's keeping CMOs up at night, and we're here to bring you that in a new format. I myself am Kosta Triantafillou, an evangelist for SAP Marketing Cloud in the SAP customer experience area, and I'm ecstatic to introduce my co-host, Jenn Vande Zande. Jenn, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you, Kosta, and thanks everybody for joining us. Today, we're going to be discussing what's most important for brands and marketers in 2021. And I wanted to kick this off by giving my 2 cents. Customers are advocates with their wallets, and they're going to choose brands that align with their values, and they're going to leave brands that don't. In 2020, we saw countless companies making statements regarding racial inequity. In 2021, those companies must make good on their promise or expect a backlash. During our first planning session for this call, I was beyond thrilled to see that other women were already included in the conversation, because that's an area where it's been lacking. But I also realized that we're still missing the mark, because diversity isn't just about gender. 2020 showed the corporate world that we have difficult questions to ask of ourselves. Why don't we have more Black coworkers? Why don't we see more people of color in leadership and executive roles? After our first call, I approached Kosta and told him that I'd like to cede my seat to our incredibly intelligent colleague, Erica Davis. Kosta insisted that she take his seat instead. In 2021, if brands aren't acting on their values, ultimately, there's no amount of marketing budget that will be able to save them. Joining us today is also Paul Smith, Maria Marias, and Jody Simmons. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to my co-host for this episode, Erica Davis. Erica, lead the way.
Thanks, Jen. The past year provided businesses a wake-up call as to what digital transformation really means and the importance of having a digital-first approach. My first question is for Maria. Obviously, digital is still critical, but as customers look forward to getting back into physical stores, so is being able to flip the brick-and-mortar switch. What are CMOs in the fashion and retail space facing in 2021 in terms of connecting these different experiences?
Well, great question, Erica. I think technology is rapidly evolving and giving rise to new opportunities for growth. However, I believe it's really down to retailers and fashion brands to disrupt the status quo and capitalize on emerging trends and technologies. So this week, I was reading the World Economic Forum report, and nearly a third of the most critical skill sets in 2025 will include technical skills that are not yet considered imperative. So what does that mean for retailers and fashion brands? I believe that this means that now is the time to transform and make the shop assistant a member of the digital team. And this type of change raises important questions, particularly when it comes to organizational structure. So if the store assistant is part of the digital team, how does that change the scope of activity of marketeers, of merchandisers, of buyers? And another thing to think about is if the shop assistant is part of the digital team, how does that change the scope of activity of call centers, both inbound and outbound? Can the shop assistant work remotely during pandemic scenarios? In 2020, we worked with some customers, with some of our clients, big retailers and fashion retailers in the world, to enable this type of use case. So I believe these are some of the CMO questions at this point in time. Particularly 2021 will be an interesting year to accelerate digitalization and conclude the change that started last year. I believe that we have a strong seat at the table because we are the only software company in the world that enables the intelligent enterprise by connecting CX touchpoints with the backend.
Excellent considerations. So, Paul, Maria made some great points that are certainly most applicable also in the direct-to-consumer space. What are CMOs doing to keep customers engaged, particularly when demand is higher, attention spans are shorter, and competition is tougher than ever?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. We need to consider that there's a growing set of countries that are experiencing second and third waves of lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. And in some cases, that's closing all but essential retail. What that means is that digital channels are essential for those retailers to survive, to communicate with their consumers, to make sure that people understand what's available, what stores are closed, how they can be serviced. And it's also important in consumer products for CP companies to offer alternatives to visiting a store through services like direct-to-consumer. What it also means is that CMOs need to stay in very close email contact with those consumers to make sure they're up to date with what they're doing, and also to make sure that any new services they're launching are clearly communicated. But it's also essential, and we're seeing a lot of attention from CMOs recognizing shifts in consumer buying behaviors. So a good example of this is kind of baking and home cooking. A huge amount of increase in Google searches about how to make your own bread, about how to make your own cakes. And actually what that means is there's an audience out there that needs that content. And people want that as easily engaging and consumable content, ideally in video form, with digital backup, maybe the ability to buy those products directly from that video feed as well. So we're seeing kind of the need for content, and we're seeing new ways of engaging consumers becoming increasingly important as part of the mix. Now, I'm just going to dial back a little bit as well and think about Q4. So Q4, we also saw some things that CMOs needed to pay attention to, with a lot of brands having to go into promotional periods early. But we also saw last year more than ever, more brands going into promotional periods early, but launching that to their loyal customers and their VIP customers 24 or 48 hours before kind of more general availability. Very good tactic for engaging people, very good tactic for ensuring loyalty and kind of clearing out any residual stock that you've got. Very popular tactic. We're seeing, because of that kind of growth of needing to acquire new customers digitally, for those that are engaged in D2C, it means paying attention to the amount of spend that you're doing on paid search and on social, and making sure that those channels are effective as possible. We're seeing shifts and trends in terms of people using more social channels and more placement of products in social channels. And we're starting to see the rise of more social commerce and more checkout. But a great way of handling that short attention span is recognizing that the mobile device is still king. It's in the pocket of most consumers. And video is still a very engaging media. So we've been working with partners of ours like TV Page, who are, back to Maria's point actually about using store staff as influencers and ambassadors. You can take those people from an existing business, have them demonstrate products on video that can be sellable online. But it's really great in terms of organic reach and SEO for acquiring new customers as well. So we're seeing CMOs moving more in those kind of directions, is how they link together marketing, sales, engagement, organic reach, and paid search, and making all of that work as a virtuous mix. Yeah. So yeah.
No, that makes so much sense, especially also giving the opportunity for customers to take part in the entire process, and also contributing their own content, contributing their own ideas, and engaging on a more authentic level. So I'd like to stay on this topic of CX and expectations, but cast a B2B lens on it. Now, Jody, personally, I don't foresee physical events happening anytime soon, especially in the manufacturing space. Nor do we expect B2B deals to be closed physically in large boardrooms as we're used to. Now, how important is it for CMOs in the B2B space to keep pursuing digital change internally to drive the B2C-like experiences that B2B buyers are wanting?
So it's very important, and B2B organizations like manufacturers that you mentioned have been working for a long time to really ramp up their tools now. They might have been a little bit behind their retail counterparts, but they're catching up. The one place where they haven't traditionally spent as much time is on personalization And digital marketing, it needs to be done by industry or consumer type, but then now businesses need to get very surgical in their approach. So they have to understand who's my buyer, because role-based segmentation in a B2B environment is critical. It's likely that buyer roles are different based on whether you're in the initial product selling versus aftermarket. So marketers have to understand that the journey and the desires of who's actually buying and making the transactional purchase are going to be very. So for example, parts procurement role is they're going to want fast, they're going to want easy methods to fulfill bulk and repeat orders. Whereas a project engineer may want the ability to deep dive into product specifications. They're going to want to custom configure exact products they need for a project. So understanding these differing perspectives gives savvy marketers an edge in their messaging that will help convert marketing into sales, which is ultimately what they want. Another piece is self-service. So self-service has become critical really for all of us in every role that we play in life. But in B2B, self-service actually helps the customer and also helps the marketing team. So a well-defined portal allows for a B2B company to not only provide the self-service capabilities that their customers are requiring, but it becomes a way for them to connect further into that segmentation. So preference setting, job role identification, buying patterns, those can all be tracked in a self-service portal and then can be used and leveraged by marketers to begin that personalization, to get very surgical in marketing. And then finally, Internet of Things. When you talk about B2B, you can't avoid Internet of Things and consumption-based selling. So what this does is allows for the marketing and sales teams to connect fully into the operational areas of B2B customers and then give them just-in-time proactive positioning of revenue. So they can have just-in-time marketing that is unique, not only to segment, but to job role, very specific product replenishment, lifecycle management, the list goes on and on. So being able to have connected assets and align those to marketing efforts is going to be where the B2B space can be.
That's fantastic insights, Jody. And actually, one of the things that's really been interesting to watch is, of course, B2C adapting to this online world, but especially B2B, how much it's transforming. So those are all excellent points, and appreciate your input. And I'd like to thank everybody who participated in this panel and everybody who joined us online. We hope that you enjoyed this first episode and look forward to seeing you again this year. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.